All right. Hello, everybody, to another installment here with the Verified Carrier podcast. Yours truly, Andrei Drotenko. And I have a special guest with me today. Curtis, if you want to go ahead, introduce yourself, let people know, you know, who you are, what organization you represent, and just generally, what do you do for the industry?
Excellent. Well, thank you. First of all, I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and let me get that reflection out of my darn eyeballs here with that light coming in through the window. So I'm Curtis Salisbury. I joined the industry about 15 years ago. You know, the infamous Jeff Hall was the one who recruited me in, and Jeff and a lot of the team over there at TRM. Been with them for a lot of years. When Jeff passed last December, it was devastating, and it was just time to go out and do my own thing. Uh, Jeff's company TRM, they don't do as much consulting as I wanted to get involved in, and I met Jeff. Crazy story. I was a consultant for a mining operation in eastern Tijuana, right there where the Otay
Just a
work.
regular, standard, normal gig that somebody would have.
Just everybody, just a standard gig that everybody goes and consults for a mining operation in Tijuana. So they produce rock, sand, and gravel. So you blow up big rocks into small rocks, you process them. I think at the peak, Desarrollos Roca Azul was importing. I think it was 140 trucks a day, something just crazy. Double bottom dump clamshells, rock, sand, and gravel, and we had a cargo theft. A bad guy, a guy who was a customer of ours, came and stole a bunch of equipment, and that escalated. And so Jeff represented the insurance company that came in for the company I work for, which was the Palomar Group of companies out of Southern California. So they did highways, they did roadways, they were graders, pavers, they did freeways, the 215 freeway they worked on. Anyway, Jeff comes in and we had a cargo theft of a couple of pieces of heavy equipment, and he interviewed me and he said, kind of tell me what's going on. And I told him, and I said, I know where everything is. And long story short, we became friends. And he said, how do you know where everything is? I said, well, before we send rock, sand, and gravel over, we have folks come in and check out the trucks, make sure there's somebody with a dog or something. These drug dogs, making certain, from a couple of retired cops down in the Chula Vista area. And so we did that at the plant, only 6 miles from the border, and some stuff got stolen. And Jeff showed up, and one thing led to another, and he heard me speaking Portuguese on the phone because I lived in Brazil, and he was surprised by that. Said, I think you thought you spoke Spanish. I said, I speak both. And one thing led to another. He invited me to go watch college football in Irvine, California at a sports bar. Me living in San Diego, North County, and Jeff was in from Dallas, and he was going to be there for the weekend. And I'm just going to tell you, we hit it off. And you've heard people call me Bishop for years. And the way that happened is Jeff found out that I was LDS, not to get religion into it, but he found out I'm a Mormon, and he tagged me with Bishop. It's never gone away. I've had people walk up to me over the years and say, I thought your first name was Bishop. Well, you're going to have to ask Jeff Hall about that. So one thing led to another. Jeff introduced me to a lot of the great cops at CTIP, California Theft Interdiction Program in SoCal. Introduced me to Mark Zavala over at LAPD Bad Cats, Gerardo Pachuca at LASD Cargo Cats. And then I got to get involved in all the cases with them. And when I was ready, I just copied and mirrored the same thing Jeff did. I went down to Latin America and started recruiting folks to work with us and investigators. And that's kind of how I got involved. And that was, 15 years ago. And when Jeff passed, it was just time. TRM doesn't do as much consulting as I wanted to do. And I still do work for him. I still do some Latin investigations, and recently with Victura, met with them last week. So I'll be doing stuff for them. But I've done just about everything: Canada, US, Latin America, straight theft, strategic theft, those hybrid thefts. And it's kind of fun to do boots on the ground, and you get yourself into some sketchy, stupid stuff. And that's how I ended up in it. And I love it. It's best job I've ever had in my life. Not the most money I've ever made in my life, but I absolutely love what I do. My background was sports agency and consulting, and I owned a landscape company for a number of years while I did these other things, but I've never found anything as enjoyable as this.
Yeah, and that's cool. I think, that old saying, if you enjoy what you do, you never work a day in your life.
That's true.
So
That's true.
we're going to be spending a lot of time working. So if you're
Yes,
not
we
doing
are.
something you like, yeah, it makes it a difficult time. Well, I guess Curtis, you are no stranger then to everything that's happening, right? And I think it was bad before, and things just ramped up even more with COVID. So the
Absolutely.
type of stuff that we've seen, the ways that they're hitting, what's kind of been your experience with the strategic cargo theft? And do you want to focus, I guess, your experience on the American side? Do you want to touch on the Latin American side, or I know we have issues, but their issues are different. So I guess maybe for starters, what
Completely
what
different.
is what is the difference there in terms of hey, I'm a trucking company on this side of the border or that side of the border. What are they seeing? What challenges are they dealing?
Correct. Well, I think that's a good place to start. I'll talk about some strategic theft that is far more prevalent in the United States and a bit in Canada, but not as much as it is in the United States. And then I'll touch a little bit about some of the straight theft that goes on in Mexico. And what we're seeing now are folks like the Armenians call centers um, over in Eastern Europe working with some of the cartels. And the challenges for truckers are completely different. In the United States, a trucker carries liability insurance. He makes certain that while the goods are in the care, custody, and control of that trucker, he's going to make absolutely certain, or his company's going to make certain that they're covered because they don't want to lose their livelihood based on underinsuring themselves. So we've done a lot of work with insurance companies. I'm currently doing some work with some great insurance companies. And down in Mexico, they really aren't responsible. The government almost looks at cargo theft as an act of God, and it's not their fault. Unfortunately, truckers down there do a lot of great people. Don't get me wrong, a lot of great people. But you've got, I'm trying to remember what my last statistic was. I think it's either 85 or 90% of the truckers in Mexico have less than 5 power units. So you look at that, and there's tens of thousands. I think it's 150,000 plus down in Mexico. So it's you know Kurt has 3 power units in Mexico. Andre has two, and Jose has 5, and they want to keep him busy. I had a case when you look at the challenges of a trucker. I've got a case a few years ago where a U.S. freight forwarder appointed a Mexican freight forwarder. That Mexican freight forwarder appointed a trucker, a very high end trucker. That trucker had bought some new power units and was heading through some very dangerous routes. And he decided to double broker it to another trucker. That trucker didn't have anything available, so he contacted his cousin who had 1 power unit and gave it to him. And through that process, nearly a $500,000 load was stolen. Because truckers aren't liable, there's a different attitude. Um, when it comes to a hijack, we always consult the trucking companies down there. Just put your hands up and do exactly what they say. You've seen the videos and the conferences I've spoken at. You know, 4 or 5 guys come in. So the challenge for a Mexican trucker is far different. They are threatened with their lives on a consistent basis. U.S. truckers, I wouldn't mess with the typical U.S. truckers. There's some tough hombres that are ready to do whatever they need to do to protect their load, and they protect themselves. Down in Mexico, there's a lot of different laws that restrict a Mexican trucker from protecting himself. So there's a lot of different challenges. And in Mexico, it's that straight theft, hijack. I think the last statistic I had was, and I'm careful with statistics because they change all the time. 2023, there was reported 23,842 hijacks with violence. We don't know if those numbers are true, but I do know what you hear people like Scott Cornell, you hear people like Alan Gear, you hear people like Chuck Forsyth, you hear all these different experts that speak on the topic. You get Bobby Hastings. All these different folks speak about this, and the bottom line is that things are constantly moving on the strategic theft side, which is the United States, where it's that manipulation. A lot of truckers don't realize they're part of the scheme. And on the Mexican side, people don't want to promote those bad statistics. So we believe it's 40% higher than whatever anybody reports. And we've heard that from people like Overhaul, CargoNet, all the different organizations. I really like what CargoNet does. I really like some of the focused efforts on them, but you've just got so many people in the industry. We're blessed to have a lot of talent in this industry, but truckers, it's a real different problem once you cross that border.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. Um, but yeah, you touched on a really good point in that a lot of the stuff that's happening, it they're different schemes. It's different manipulation. I feel like the level of sophistication, and it's not to say, one's going to be better or worse. In both situations, the result is there's a loss. If you're an insurance carrier, right, it's bad. And then premiums adjust. But you have that violence piece that happens. That's terrible, right? You don't want to be in those shoes. But then now you have people who are unwittingly, they did everything right and they picked up, they delivered on time, they paid for the fuel, they have their truck payment to deal with, only to find out that that was a double broker and they're not even going to get paid. And they're one of countless loads, and then up until what it take, Guy Fieri's tequila gets stolen, or it'll be Shaq's custom Range Rover or whatever that was, a load of Costco lobsters. There's a few cases that see the light of day in the media, but then for the rest of it, and we're talking about like millions and millions. And I know Tapa's working on putting together some solid numbers, but um, sometimes the trucking companies, they don't know that they're part of the scam. And as far as they're concerned, they did everything right and they become a carrier victim. And then you have situations where the carrier's playing a victim, but they're actually in on the scam. And then,
Correct.
you have people who open up real companies and they're just gaining trust. So for all intents and purposes, they are real trucking companies moving freight, doing a pretty good job. And they're just waiting to just go, on a big one. I think, I don't know if it was last summer or the summer before, but Agility Express, almost a nearly spotless MC, and they pulled off like, I don't know, 40, 60
Yeah.
hostage loads.
Yeah.
And so, what do people need to do, Curtis? How can they, whether it's people, processes, do they have somebody checking every single truck and, looking at the VIN number with a flashlight? What is realistic in terms of what people can do? I know there's a few platforms. Obviously, I know which one's the best. I'm not going to say it, but um, there's different products available, but no product is going to be your silver bullet, right?
No, it's not.
What other things can people do? If somebody's watching and they're like, hey, you know what? We almost had one stolen. Thankfully not. But like, what can we do at an organization level to protect ourselves?
Yeah, let me give you that's a great question. Let me give you a couple. Let me give you one scenario first. So I had um, some bad actors that had manipulated the system, and they contacted a trucker. Let's say, I'll be careful about this, so I'll use different states. They contacted a trucker in Tennessee, and they say, "Hey, we see that you're selling your truck and your business, and we'd like to buy it." What they were after is obviously the MC number, and they said, "We're gonna buy this from you for I can't remember the exact number. It was $50,000, $60,000. It was an old beat up truck, and he had a trailer that needed to be replaced. There weren't tires on it. All those things. He needed to spend some money. He was a much older gentleman, wanted out of the business. So some bad actors contact him and said, "Hey, let's grab this." And so you know what we'll do is we'll pay you $5,000 a month until it's paid off, and we just want to buy your company. So of course they took the MC number and everything. The guy has no idea that they're picking up loads under his name, and he's making payments on it, but they have no idea they're misdirecting freight. Now, what they did initially is they delivered the goods on purpose because they want to get a reputation on a load board. So in that scenario, Sometimes they'll paint a different one. And this is specifically about how to solve these problems. If you're a trucker out there and somebody calls you up and says, "Hey, I'm Andre's broke truck brokering, and Andre's truck brokering would like to give you some work." You're in the Tennessee area, right? We got a lot of work in the Southeast, and we need you to go coast to coast. So can you do that for us? We see you got 3 power units. Will you do that for us? Absolutely. Why don't you send me your carrier package? So Dummy Kurt sends his carrier package to Andre. Andre then contacts a big freight broker and says, "Hey, I'm Kurt's Trucking, and I'd like to sign up with you guys. Look off your load board." So there's some load board issues. Load boards aren't the devil. Too many people say load boards are the devil, but they are something you have to be extremely cautious with. So in this scenario, what they did was is they represented to the freight forwarder. They were the trucker, and to the trucker, they were the freight forwarder. Now they're in control. And now, in one case, a little different, they appointed a trucker to go pick up some nuts in Central California. He picked them up. They called him. "We got an emergency. Bring him to this cross dock. Here's a trailer. We need you to go up to Minnesota. So just drop these off and we'll pay you on Venmo right now." The truck driver probably knew something was up. He was a single owner trucker, owner operator. And he gets pulled over because the trailer they gave him was stolen. But they got the goods. They ran off with everything. And as a matter of fact, that one was not nuts. That one was a wine from Northern California. So, so
They did
how do
them
you
dirty.
fight that? How do you fight that? If it's too good to be true, it is the first rule of thumb. But candidly, there are so many applications. Well, let me tell you a quick story about my son worked for, the reason I was so attracted to what you guys do at Verified Carrier, my son was a programmer for Plaid. I love the Plaid portion of what you guys do. And so I know all about Plaid, and I'll leave that up to you to explain. But, when you're verifying bank accounts and verifying those kinds of things, that's one step. When you can get a type of software application that checks in the gate and it's blockchain, everybody gets to see that. That's another step. But more importantly, common sense. If something looks too good to be true, it probably is. And understand that they're looking for high value loads, and you need to do everything you can in a layered approach to have a verified carrier, to have a proper software, be it Babaco or anybody else, to have high value loads. We look at Despair. We look at you look at folks like Pegasus. You got all these different folks that do different things, but it's really affordable now to put a tracking device not only on your tractor trailer on the rig, but to put it within the pallets, to place it there. I'll just tell you this because it's very important. In Mexico, the biggest problem that an escort company has is they pull into the yard and they hook themselves like a trailer to the back of the rig. And the bad guys immediately know when they're going to hijack. Same thing happens if you have somebody following a load in the US. They immediately identify who the escort company is. So you need a sophistication, especially in the high value, high risk areas, where you're using the kind of carriers, the kind of monitoring companies that really know what they're doing, that are professionals. And then, of course, you know Lee Ambrose, don't you? Over at RSS, they do he uses drones. They do some really high tech stuff. And I know that Despair's used them in the past, but there's just a lot of good companies out there. There's stuff that Overhaul does. Everybody does something great. The key is finding what's specific for your company, layered. And as a trucker, you make absolutely certain that you don't double broker it, and you have proper insurance, and you never, ever, ever leave your rig unattended, ever, for any reason. Don't go park in a yard. Understand what a secure yard rate means. Don't park in front of your apartment because you want to visit your girlfriend, you want to go have a couple of beers, because your rig is going to be gone because people are following you from origin. It is the human error is what causes most of it, but it's the technological ignorance where people don't use technology properly to be able to save their bacon.
Yeah, solid points. Yeah, because I know the higher value the freight, the more the brokerages do to ensure that these carriers have certain SOPs in place to be able to do it. And depending who you're talking to, it's 200, 250 miles. Don't stop. We want team drivers, so on and so forth. But they know enough to not be looking at those guys. They want that guy who's gonna go and oh, there's a bacon and egg special. I'm gonna go inside and like you said, or just pull off thinking that everything's fine. But depending where you left, yes, you now have a tail. The scariest part, looking at some of those cargo net statistics, is that it used to be right Chicago, LA, some New York, Miami, and now you could be out in
Pocatello,
I,
Idaho.
I was just about to say Podunk, Montana, but yours sounds a little cleaner and a
Pocatello,
little
Idaho.
nicer,
Went to
Andrew.
college. There you go. Now
Yes, and
BYU,
then
Idaho.
they're getting hit. So yeah, it's the limitations geographically that used to exist before. Again, the level of sophistication by which they would target victims. It's all everything's getting blurred, everything's getting spread out. And as far as these scammers that are even setting this stuff up, sometimes they don't do anything. There's no,
Right.
I like to joke. It's
Make a phone
it's the
call.
honest. It was the honest hard work before, where they at least had to get into a car early in the morning, have a crowbar on them, do some real work.
Slim Jim.
And now they're sitting in who knows where overseas, a handful of countries where they're really active. They're literally have it delivered to a port on a silver platter, and everybody thinks it was fine. And they're working remote, just like a lot of U.S. workers are. They're doing the same thing.
I'll give you two quick scenarios, Andre, that are interesting. When I first joined the industry, I got an assignment after I'd been in about a year and a half. I got an assignment out in Ontario, and the roll up door at the dock, they had cut out that entire aluminum door, 2 feet high. They then hot wired the box truck, put it right back up to the doors, and took black bisqueen and put it all around. And a facility that closed at 5 o'clock on a Friday with a Monday holiday of Memorial Day was going to be closed for 3 days. No security guard, no nothing. Everything's in the warehouse. Let's not worry about it. Everything's good. Everything's buttoned up. Trucks parked within the yard. They back it up. They cut with a quick little blowtorch that open, and they had an inside deal where somebody had raised the PET sensor. Do you know what a PET sensor is inside a warehouse? The PET
I mean, I'm
sensor.
imagining, is it like the one where if they miss a line, it goes off?
Yeah, well, what it is there's that line, that laser line, and in layman terms, they raise that up, and if it's a certain height, you can be on a crawl board and go on that. It's for rats. If you have it set too low, a rat's going to set it off if a rat gets in there, or a mouse. But if you set it higher, a dog will set it off. A cat with his tail will set it off because the tail might be over 2
Or are
feet.
we talking about that laser line that I have to step over if I hit the button in the garage and run over to?
Similar to that,
Okay.
but if you go higher than that laser line, all the other sensors are going to go off. But there is that magic space where people used to keep that a little higher. Well, there was an aspect of an inside job on this, and this is years ago, and somebody had adjusted that PET sensor higher. Bad guys show up. This is a straight theft. They use a crawl board, and then they use the very conveyors within to build while lying on the floor until somebody disabled the alarm system. It was an unsophisticated alarm system. And then they shopped all weekend. And everything went right out that cut open thing into the back of a box truck, the very box truck that was at the same yard. They just drove that back and forth all weekend long and stole a bunch of stuff. That's how it used to be. Now it's that call center in Armenia, that call center in Chechnyans. It's Ecuadorians, as Jeff All used to always talk about. It's a group in Southern California. Whoever the bad actors are, they get somebody else to do their dirty work. And it's so sophisticated. Change the bill of lading, change the POD. You're going to deliver to somebody. You got a big, busy warehouse. They're signing off stuff. The guy's not checking it. 6 months later, the company contacts the freight forwarder saying, you appointed this trucker and we're short all these goods. Well, wait a minute. You guys signed off on it. Oh, no, wait. I don't understand what's going on. and they're just pilfering it. That's all they're doing. Just take a few pallets off, doctor the goods, doctor the POD to say to delivery, oh, it's only 14 pallets. But then they send to the freight forwarder the original one that says it's 18 pallets, and they got 4 pallets, and they keep doing that week in and week out until somebody catches it and they're out of the business. So it's crazy the things that'll go on and the things that'll happen.
Yeah, and they'll just go and burr that MC and then just rinse and repeat and just so
I
there's
like I
yeah.
like the term rinse and repeat. That's exactly what they're doing. Great line.
Um Unfortunately, some of these lines that stick. I'm just like, I
I
wish it
like it.
weren't so.
I
Right?
like it. It works. It works.
If we could just have a healthy supply chain and people could just make money, moving freight, stocking shelves, focusing on marketing, that's the perfect world. But
Could I
we
ask you
are where
one
we are.
question real quick?
Sure.
Just one question. Why don't you tell me a little bit more about the application you folks do? And you can edit all this out, of course. Why don't you tell me a little bit more about what you guys do with that connection you have with Plaid?
Yeah. Well, Plaid is just one of the many steps. So we believe in a multi-layered point of verification approach, meaning you have all these different steps. In the off chance that you fudge one, two of these steps, the idea is you can't fudge them all. And so whether it's, the owner's got to come in and approve the whole thing and, do a government issued ID, do a facial recognition scan, log in. We want to see that the beneficiary information matches the MC filing, matches the LLC that was set up. So we triangulate all this different data and we do the same thing for the fleet component. So we want to see cap cards, registrations. We want to check with insurance that these vehicles are actually part of the fleet, right? Because anybody could go in, file a MCS 150 and say, all right, I had 3 trucks. Now I have 20 trucks, right? Nobody's the wiser. And so that Plaid piece is really important because of the fact that when you do rinse and repeat, right? So if you want to go nurture 10 MCs, you can go find 10 different individuals potentially to go set these companies under, because the penalties for having, oh, I didn't know, somebody stole my identity or whatever it is, it's pretty low. They're working on some, cargo retail. There's a household goods thing with, giving the FMCSA some teeth for double brokering and all that, which is great. We were for it. We joined the TIA. We went to Washington, D.C. for it. But at the same time, the scammers know that. So they can keep just doing what they're doing because it's such a low threshold that there's so much tolerance, if you want to call it that, for what they do. Because on the flip side, it's ease of business, right? In America, the coolest thing compared to when I lived in Spain, for example, is you can open a company. The company could blow up and, market forces can change and you can just decide, hey, this doesn't make any more sense. I'm going to pivot to this. And I'm not just going to have my company this whole thing doesn't make sense anymore. And boom, you can shut it down. You can start a new one. That's awesome. That's great. You don't have to pay this indemnization. You don't have to, give everybody a 45-page report for your business decisions. The government doesn't regulate your accounting. But the scammers are taking advantage of that. So it's a great system when people are working with integrity, right? We do things a little more honor based, and we're becoming more litigious, so we have to write longer contracts and stipulate all this stuff. But the systems are different, and so that's what they're taking advantage of. That's why we now need to see this. But 2 things that I've learned that these guys know to stay away from, knowing enough about America, is you don't do financial crime, right? Once you do financial stuff, you're going to prison. Once you do, and I mean by fraud, like financial fraud,
Correct.
right? They're doing stuff, they're getting paid, there are services rendered, but it's it's either they're already gone or something else happened, but they don't do it through like the banking route, because that's a different set of consequences.
Don't want to get the
The
FBI involved where you don't need to.
Yeah, physical harm, right? Different set of consequences,
Right.
right? Because it just feels like you steal a $10,000 car, you're almost going to get more in trouble than if you stole $100,000 load.
Correct.
And
And
that's
that is true.
That's terrible. But so then going back to all of this, with all of this information, it's much easier to set up 10 MCs under 10 individuals, friends, relatives, whatever. If your name starts popping up and you own 3 trucking companies, right, that could raise a flag. So they have a way of doing it, whether they're buying them, whether they're masquerading, whether it's friends, relatives. But scammers are they don't have that same level of trust to let money flow to different places, and people don't want stuff opened up under their name and trusting a bunch of people to remit money. That's how they're able to get away with a lot of this. So this step that you mentioned here is crucial because this information is unbeknownst to everybody. This is below the surface. So even if you're doing all these points and you're checking their LLC and you could call the Secretary of State and that's a real company, where's the money flowing? And if you
Right.
could see that, now the scatter plot becomes a web and you could see where the center is. You could see it could be a few centers, but you could see what those focal points are.
Yeah.
So
Two
that's why I
quick
think that
points.
that
2 quick points to hit right on what you're talking about, that layered approach. When Alan Gear called me and asked me to get involved with him from a consulting standpoint, I would always see those gaps, what happened, but just couldn't do anything about it because you're working for an insurance company and they want to make certain that this was a verified cargo theft and if there's a recovery opportunity. So in joining Alan, we came up with this concept of CAPS. And CAPS is a critical action plan and strategy. That's what we call it. CAPS are a seal to things. And what I love about the consulting piece with Alan is that we can actually see between the two of us from a proactive standpoint and from a reactive standpoint what's gone wrong. And then we can find those gaps in processes and procedures and help companies do the right thing. And we desperately need partners like you folks at Verified Carrier to we look at, and whether we do consulting for them or not, and we don't do any consulting for you folks, but whether we do that or not, this layered approach, we're able to help people simply through, intellectual properties to say, hey, here's a real problem. And the second point is, I was on a flight years ago and I met a guy who was a very interesting job. He was the guy who basically painted the laser on the site for the bomb to be dropped. And he did it in Afghanistan. Very, very dangerous job. Had a couple snipers with him, had a radio man. I don't know all the details. But we met while we were returning our rental cars. We just started talking. I noticed he had a tattoo that was similar to my father's, 82nd Airborne. So my dad was 82nd Airborne. We had great conversation. We ended up on the same plane to Atlanta, from San Francisco to Atlanta, and he made a great comment. We got to know each other, what we do. He was teasing me that I was nuts to go down to Latin America and do the crazy stuff that I do, and I was teasing him, well, at least I don't have people shooting at me in bombs. He said, eventually you will. We joked about it. And he said a very profound thing. If people knew what really went on in this world, they would be far more cautious, even letting their children play at the neighbor's house. And that is such a stark warning that we have to look at. We have to treat cargo at the value that it is and the business relationship it represents. And we need to treat it like it's our children out playing, or our daughter's going to go date some guy that we don't even know. We need to be far more cognizant of what we're doing when those goods are in our care, custody, and control. That means something. Care, custody, and control. And truckers would be well versed to do more of that and find and seek out folks like you, folks like all these different entities that can help, proper security locks, everything that they can possibly do to protect that precious load, whether it's a $100,000 load or an $18 million load of servers. That's what they need to do. Attitudes have to
yeah,
change.
yeah, yeah. No, I think that's a great way to look at it. And then Curtis, I guess just takeaway here, great example, great things that people can be doing. What do you think? What do you think is going to happen here? What are the next, you know, 12 months to 5 years? What do they look like?
Until, and I want to be very careful not to go political here, but
No, no,
until
no. You could do anything, Curtis. This is a safe space.
Sweet, sweet. What we need to do is get folks that are more on the lenient side of life, way too liberal about what happens to the bad guy, and far more caring about how it's destroying businesses. And those laws need to change, and the federal government needs to see to it that we've got to remember we are a country of independent states. But when the independent states aren't taking care of their citizens, like the United States, when it doesn't take care of its citizens, that's when things will get worse or get better. And we need to understand that cargo theft is so easy because we have corporate leaders at that level that are bad guys. It's no longer a guy, like you said earlier, a guy with some keys and I said a Slim Jim. It's a very extreme sophistication. We recovered one load from some really bad guys in Armenia one time. They picked up a piece of artwork going to the Smithsonian and thought it was worth 500,000. Well, that's what the art market said it was worth. They actually thought it was a giant silver piece of artwork. When I was on the phone, was able to convince them, understand this is going to the Smithsonian, and rain of fire is going to come down on you when you're stealing from the government. Everybody's going to be involved in this, especially something that's going for display at the Smithsonian. They finally gave us the phone number of the actual driver that they abused. He was flown out of South Carolina, said a rig is waiting for him, got there. Oh, we're sorry, here in Southern California, it's not ready. And they put him in a U-Haul truck. And the guy was so desperate for work, he took it. And he's running across the country to deliver it anywhere he could. He had to beg for gas. When we finally got his number, we persuaded him to pull over and wait for a law enforcement officer, a state patrol unit to pull in, make sure he's secure. We got him some funds. He had a meal. He stayed in a hotel. He did the right thing. People really want to do the right thing when they realize what's going on. Education is the key.
Yeah, yeah, and I want to plug. There's great organizations, whether it's like the TIA that's putting out information, CAPA that's putting out information. Travelers Verisk have the Cargo Theft Summit. These are great events for people to get out. I think the HDA PCSC is coming up here. I think Chuck, leads that effort. But just great places for companies to get out there. Yeah, get out there. For anyone watching, just you're gonna hear, here's the evolving tactics that are being used. Here's what you can do. You have leaders from all these different companies, and I think education for that piece, right? Have somebody there, have somebody who can take this stuff and then take it back. Just hearing it passively is one thing. Putting it into action in your company, that's another. And I think there's great takeaways there. So I think that's, a great place to end. And we'll share the links for those organizations as well. So if anyone's interested, there's events throughout the whole year. And Curtis, like you said, it's the education piece. Yeah, get educated, protect it, right? It's not anyone's problem. It's not this shipper's problem or that company's problem. It's whatever. We all show up to the store and there's the sneakers and there's that speaker that you wanted and there's the food on the shelf. We pay for it. The insurance company paid out a claim. It all gets passed to us. So, right, it hits all of us in our wallets. So it's our job to defend our house.
What I love about this industry, like no other industry I've been involved in, is that the constant preach from our dear friend Jeff Hall, who's passed to the other side, to everybody we hear speak, the constant message is you pick up a phone and call and there's somebody there to help. My dad had a statement and I enhanced on it. My kids know it to this day, and it's be a truck, not a trailer. Ironic that I'm in this industry now. I heard this when I was 11 years old, missing a goal in a soccer and passing it to the wrong guy. And my dad said, son, there's times you got to be a truck, not a trailer. That's when he was in active military. While I was living in Brazil, I came up with a statement and said, I will teach this to my wife and my kids. And that statement is simply this: be a truck, not a trailer, and a giver, not a taker. Learn to follow before you lead and always give more than you take. If we give more to the industry, we don't have to take it. It's going to naturally be there. And there's a lot of fantastic people that we've all mentioned here and great companies that we've mentioned here that help in that aspect. And there's others that we don't even know of. which is why it's a pleasure to meet you and your group. And you helped me. I think I didn't know how to use LinkedIn correctly because I'd never use it. We're sitting at a table and you're helping me figure out LinkedIn, and now I'm on it all the time. But again, people who are just there to help, it's critically important in this industry, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, glad to help. Glad to keep helping. Curtis, thanks for jumping on. Really appreciate your time. I know you have a lot going on. Um, so thanks. And I really do think there's a lot of beneficial information for people to glean from this episode.
Appreciate it. Thank you, my friend. Take care. Bye bye.